of Siena.
Thank you.
And the University of Siena and the conference.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you, Aliki. That was the most perfect introduction. Because for those of you who know fielding, we believe in asking deep, broad, divergent kinds of questions and to have fun doing it. And I get the sense, I went to one of your conferences many, many years ago, and this is my first time back in a long time, and I sense the same level of enthusiasm and engagement. So I hope that what we talk about today will be an opportunity to think critically, to have fun, and perhaps we'll take a few ideas with us that starts laying more fertile ground in the particular area I'm talking about, which is global environmental problems and solutions. What you will see here, I will not refer to. They are simply for your reflection. I thought in Italy, where it's artistic, it's lovely, it's a good experience to be here and open both our cognitive and our hearts at the same time. So for those of you who enjoy visual, there you have it. These are beautiful spaces and places and animals and people. So I was 12 years old when I had my first disorienting dilemma at school. In biology class, I read about the widespread loss of other species due to human impacts on the natural world. Now, I grew up on a farm, and I knew something about growing vegetables and about selling them to markets. My family talked constantly about the weather, and those of you who grew up in rural settings would understand that, and also about the costs of farming and the risks. My father was a full-time mechanic, and that was the biggest source of income in our family when the crops didn't do well from year to year. And in my young mind, I thought I knew how the world worked, the rhythms of seasons, the cycles of life. It just didn't seem possible to me in reading what I was reading about species loss and pollution that we would, as human beings, be so dumb to do this. But these were the 1970s when the environmental movement was gaining leverage in countries all around the world. And as I look back at this, my little corner of the planet, my biology teacher was probably a young person. You know how when you're 12, everyone seems old. It was probably a young person exploring the latest thinking about environmental activism. I'll never know because it was years later as an adult that I realized that his classroom was one of those learning turning points for me. And by then it was too late to ask him. What was disorienting to me was the sense that the reality was far different than I assumed. That's what brings in that disorientation. To me, until that point, the world was governed by a sense of logic, not by something that was irrational. Adults generally knew what they were doing, in my young mind. But I thought of my younger self recently when reading some of the speeches of Greta Thunberg, the climate activist. She was 8 years old when she first learned about climate change, and it's clear in her remarks that part of her outrage stems from a disorientation brought upon by how the adults around her were acting in ways against their own, that is, our own interests and future. As she writes, adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope, she says. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is, she says. So these are very strong words, and I thought about this in terms of this notion of creating and keeping good trouble going. Good trouble going for sustainability, good trouble going for democratic institutions, good trouble going for racial harmony, good trouble going for the structural inequality we face globally. These strong words are coming from someone who is also at the same time confronting the kind of dissonance that can lead to transformational learning. Her experience is just one public example, but every day, everywhere, we can build the kinds of learning spaces that open people to new ideas that start to lead them on their path. And that's why we're here today. So I believe in transformational learning, transformative learning, as part of the path to social action that leads to a more humane world. This disorienting dilemma at age 12 led me on a lifelong exploration about how I learn, how other people learn, and what we do with what we learn. So you might be saying to yourself, is this experience truly a disorienting dilemma in the Mezirow sense? But as one of the leading transformative theorists of our time, I was glad to hear this morning, theory is not dogma. Mezirow himself would have said, we need to think much more expansively about what a disorienting dilemma is, and in some of the concepts and conceptual framework that powers this idea that we begin with a collision, an absolute collision between the way we've been thinking and acting and a new reality we must come to grips with. And it is in that disorientation that allows for new learning. Should we be prepared to deal with the uncertainty, the fear, can we come to grips with, and then start to build new understandings? And that's why we're here this week, to learn from each other, to engage in stimulating conversation, to make sure as scholars and educators and learners ourselves, we're touching upon a diverse number of ideas and fields and disciplines. At the same time, for those of us who are guests of this beautiful place and beautiful city, we want to absorb and take on the energy of this wonderful history, the beautiful food, the wonderful people, the places that we can be that will stimulate, right? The being in different places with different people and different cultures. This is a kind of intertwining, I'd say. If you look at our program, you can see that our ideas, initially of transformative learning, have just spread out like tendrils in the gardens in the farm I grew up on. And that range is really exciting. This intertwining is something we must do to continue our own paths of learning and action. So while we're here, I know, because I can see it already, that we want to make sure we're truly present as much as we can be, even though there's always pulls to other places and times. For ourselves, be present for ourselves and with each other. And for some, the path to arrive here at this moment and at this time was a long one. Only you know your life stories, but they can be metaphorical paths as well as physical. And let's bring our best selves to the discussion. And I do just want to thank the organizers again. You've done an incredible job. I can feel it in the energy and friendship and love of the people around us to care for us as conference participants. So thank you, Aliki and Claudia, the rector, or the university president, and so on, to make all of this possible. So if you reflect on possible disorientations from your younger selves, it's easy to see that as children, our dilemmas can seem both smaller and bigger compared to adults. And for those of you who work with children and young adults, you may have some good experience in this regard. So the dilemmas can be smaller in that our worlds as children are more insular, but they are bigger because we have fewer experiences to assist in resolving conflicting data. The idea that there is more than one way to think about something is one of the first things that children often experience and they have to figure out. I make this point because there's a parallel between humanity's approach to the growing global environmental crisis and the disorienting dilemma of transformative learning. We ourselves, collectively, are like the child who confronts an enormous disorienting situation for the first time. So here's another story from my past that I found disorienting. In the early 2000s, I left university to work full-time in the environmental movement. And it was an exciting moment in environmentalism and conservation. In the United States, there was strong bipartisanship, hard to believe now, but this made possible great strides in the 70s and 80s and 90s to protect endangered species, to expand national parks and monuments, to reduce air pollution, to improve water quality, as just some examples. Across the United States and Europe, as well as in other regions, there was marked and substantial progress in many areas, and it felt like this was the path forward. It was going to be an incremental and steady progress towards a healthier planet where humans could live in balance with nature. This was when the notion of sustainability really came out strongly into the fore and more in the public language. So originally coined in the 1970s, the idea that we could indeed balance the needs of the current generation while leaving enough resources for future generations, this seemed really within reach. And still vivid in my mind, as if it were yesterday, I remember standing on the south rim of Grand Canyon National Park in northern Arizona. President Clinton is standing with me and my colleagues. Well, actually, he's sort of over there, but he's close enough. Not too close to the edge of the canyon. But he's proclaiming he's going to add 1 million acres to the park with a declaration of a new monument known as Grand Staircase Parashant National Monument. And my mind is racing across the past months of hard work, the political wrangling, the opposition, all the trouble it took to get there, the good trouble we had to make. But here it is, it was really happening. And I look out over the magnificent space that is the Grand Canyon, and for those of you who've been there, you can understand that feeling of awe and the grandeur of it. And I thought at the time, I don't have to do anything else in my life. Just knowing this place will always be protected. From those heady times, we now know, after decades of conservation efforts all over the world, things are worse on every environmental measure. Water quality and quantity, deforestation, desertification, species loss, the list goes on. Scientists talk about the sixth extinction of life on the planet. There are frequent reports of more intense storms and severe flooding, rampant wildfires, climate refugees, sea level rise, warmest years on record, alarming loss of polar ice, Arctic polar ice. Half the species of birds in the world are in decline. There are soaring demands for resources from a human population at 7.7 billion. And I have to say, if that doesn't represent a profound disorientation of our view of normal, I really don't know what does. Much of this disorientation, though, comes from the contradictions that are ever present. We have copious science about the warming of temperatures, the increasing frequency and severity of storms, but we are told that, as good citizens, we should be recycling or switching to LED light bulbs or planting a tree or stopping to use plastic straws and plastic bags or take the bus. Of course, these are good things on an individual level, and collectively, they make a difference. However, the scale of the solutions do not align with the scope of the problem, and that's one fundamental contradiction. But there are other contradictions in play. How many of us own a hybrid or electric vehicle but fly in airplanes often? I do. How many of us do not eat red meat, but we might eat vegan or vegetarian food that has palm oil for which rainforests are cleared? How many of us know the importance of small ecological footprints, but may live in two places? Most of us live in industrial and post-industrial societies. Most of us want to do the right thing. But what is the right thing? Every day we are faced with making personal choices in a system that's predicated on the idea that we have infinite resources in a finite world. I liken this reality to a dance party where we're all drunk on oil and we just keep dancing like it will be like this forever. How is it that humans have enormous capacity to adapt while simultaneously we have such resistance to change? And to me, this is a conundrum that also speaks to learners and to people like ourselves trying to create transformational learning spaces. How is it we would rather deny what faces us than address it, even though we have the technological means to do so, or at least much of the means to do so? How can the current generation of people born between 1946 to 1962, often called the baby boomers in some countries, many of whom fought so hard for peace, democracy, civil rights, think that now they can leave the problems to the next generation? Obviously not everyone, but that doesn't really make sense. We're all connected. We're all kin to each other. So what are we to make of these runaway problems, now so acute that geologists are debating the idea that we have entered the Anthropocene, having closed the Holocene era behind us? The Anthropocene in this view is a geologic period dominated by human actions, much like the Jurassic period was dominated by the habitats of dinosaurs. The Holocene period, which is ending, this is the hypothesis, spanned the last 11,500 years and is known for stable weather, moderate temperatures. These factors created the perfect conditions for humans to build societies and expand our population, which we did very successfully. But what is ahead, many argue, is the beginning of the sixth extinction, caused not by meteors or ice ages, but by us. So while geographers, environmental historians, other scholars continue to grapple with these ideas, it may be helpful to remember what caused the last 5 extinctions. In the first, ice ages and geologic upheavals. In the second, rapid and severe global cooling brought upon by the diversification and growth of land plants. Third, global warming caused by massive volcanic activity. The fourth, underwater volcanic activity that caused another global warming event that was complicated also by chemical compositions. And fifth, and the last one, and the one we think of, was the meteor that caused global cooling because it came into the planet, wiped out life. And the sixth, caused by us? This is almost inconceivable. So I'm taking my 2 ideas equally powerful. The first is that every other living species on Earth is better than we, humans, at something. Now, I say this very categorically. I would challenge you to come up to me and say, I can think of one that doesn't. Every species on Earth is better than humans are at something. For example, giant redwood trees pump thousands of gallons of water, hundreds of feet in the air, to feed itself with no mechanical assistance whatsoever. I can't do that. Dogs can smell up to 100,000 times better than humans can. No wonder they love to go out for walks. Years after they were born, salmon can return to the same river based solely on their ability to sense the chemistry of the water where they were born. I know I can't do that. Every species, the more we learn, from animals to insects, have unique qualities. This, to me, is a very powerful idea. The second, equally powerful idea is that humans are by far the best manipulators of our surroundings on the planet. We are highly adaptable. Just look around. This beautiful university was founded formally in 1240, but even before. We have beautiful clothes, technological devices, this comfortable building, this beautiful space, the lighting, and so on. This is a demonstrable indication of our ability to manipulate environments, right? The built environment. These are 2 powerful thoughts. And as a juxtaposition or a connection to them, these two ideas remind me that because humans are capable of extreme environmental manipulation and all animals are unique in their own ways, we have a particular duty of care to be responsible for other species on this earth. This is an important and notable challenge, if you will. We are a species with tremendous power to do good. Let's not give that power away. And the second order effects of our industrial processes, our modern way of life, and technology threatens all life on Earth, including our own. So, if you argue that the sixth extinction is indeed underway, it's the biggest disorientation of all that we both cause it and we can solve it if we choose. And this is the point that Greta Thunberg is ultimately making as well. Having now created the conditions, somewhat accidentally, it wasn't like we meant to do this, for our own extinction, humans have tremendous courage in the face of adversity. We've seen it historically. You can probably think of it in your own life. Individual courage, personal courage. We all need courage to get through our lives. My friend who runs a charitable foundation once said to me, when it comes to climate action, I'm betting on team people. And I thought, me too. Because people are stepping up. People are learning ways to cope with this disorientation. And what is this next step after disorientation and growing awareness, after all? Is learning. What we're doing here is learning and learning with others. Groups are forming. You can see this if you go on the internet. Global witnessing is occurring in various places, including virtually, where people gather to share their reflections on the environmental crisis, coordinate action, talk about it, meditate, explore mutual grief. Virtual gatherings, such as the video series Active Hope, offers an account about moving from a passive position of hoping for good and doing our best to catalyzing action for change. An eco-philosopher activist, Joanna Macy, who many of you know, has made it her life's work to help people become aware, to reflect, to heal, and then engage in action that leads to transformation. In other arenas, psychologists are reporting record demand around the world for counseling to manage anxiety and fear, which includes, not exclusively, but does include people wanting to discuss their ecological grief, also known as eco-grief. The American Psychological Association defines eco-grief as when people notice or anticipate the loss of species, ecosystems, and meaningful landscapes due to acute or chronic environmental change. In a 2020 poll in the United States, APA found that 56% of US adults believe climate change is the most critical issue today, and 7 in 10 people say that they wish there was more they could do to combat climate change. About 68% of adults said they have some eco-anxiety. So as learners, we can recognize this first idea of transformative learning, becoming aware of a reality that's not aligned to what we think or how we've been acting. As these stories demonstrate, the global environmental crisis is the most disorienting dilemma that humanity faces in this century. And it's no wonder that denial or despair on a global scale is evident. Layered onto our emotional reactions to the crisis is the realization that what actions we have taken, as I've said, have not yet been enough, or so it seems. Decades of vigorous protests, scientific studies, calls for global and local action, policy work, corporate sustainable efforts, there just haven't been enough to stop the pernicious impacts of human use and abuse of natural resources. The consequences, which I've already talked about. And I think this disorientation is so much to bear for many, including people right here, right with us, including myself. It's hard to let our awareness into our being, and much less use this awareness to act, lest we are overcome entirely with a sense of hopelessness. And in this, I think Mesereau and all of the people who followed Mesereau, who surround us with their critical thinking, and a lifelong dedication to transformative learning. In this, I think we are unaware in our own time of the enormity of climate dilemma. I think transformational learning does provide a way out towards the bright light. So here we go. I'm going to tell you about it now. Well, the first thing I'd like to tell you is there's no big idea here. I would like to tell you there's a big idea for solving the dilemma of climate change, but there isn't. There isn't a Shazam idea that's going to reverse the assault on our planet. If there was, I would be first in line. I'd be telling you, and then we could tell everybody. There isn't a single silver bullet that we can wish someone else would put in place, deploy for us, that we can continue to living our lives unchanged. In fact, it is this idea of not someone else that's the crux of my message. It's not going to be someone else. It's not going to be some government, the United Nations, the European Union, another political or organizational entity that will solve this humanity-threatening problem for us. It is us, and it is not one person, it's all of us collectively. And this is my message to you. You might call this, or I call this, the many small ideas, as opposed to big idea. But they are not. They may be small or big, innovative or routine, creative or dull and ordinary, but everyone who must be involved in this deceleration of the human impact on the environment. We don't have to solve everything. We just need to decelerate. We don't have to stop everything. We just need to slow down. Our individual impact, as well as our overall society impact. That's all we have to do. We can do it incrementally, but we need to do it now. And this is what makes me optimistic. We don't have to wait for anybody. We don't have to wait for a major government or international organization. I mean, clearly, part of our role will be to try to catalyze large organizations, but we don't have to wait. They will help, they will contribute much, but it will be up to us personally in our communities, in our professions, among our colleagues, in our research, our writing, our state, our country, whatever our personal sphere of influence is, to work towards this goal. And that's what will make a difference. That's what gives me hope. So I suggest we employ something we already know works. That the big idea is that the solutions lie in the many, many ideas, and that this is already happening. We just need to marshal more resources, more people in every space that we're in. So to recap, just a moment, take a deep breath. I am arguing that the global environmental crisis is collectively humanity's most serious disorienting dilemma of this century, and that we have seen a range of responses, including denial, action, and grief. We tend to seesaw between despair and denial. Embedded in our collective experience are the contradictions of living in a modern society based on an economic system that is unsustainable. However, I'm also saying we are not at a crossroads. We are already on the path of transformation and change, whether we realize it or not, or even whether we chose it or not, because you see this every day when you read stories about new inventions, protests against ongoing environmental destruction, advancements in renewable energy, all of these things, just to name a few, but there's many more. How we transform globally will impact generations far into the future. In every industry across the globe, there are inventors and entrepreneurs improving the ways they do business. The drivers are many, not necessarily their great awareness of climate change. It could be scarcity of resources, vulnerability of global supply chains, passion for making a difference, government incentives. These are all pushing, and they're all pushes that are setting us along the path. Our work is not about making a case. It's about inspiring others to become aware of and understand the path we are already on. As a colleague from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research said, our goal is that consumers can choose amongst products that are all sustainable, not between one that is and one that isn't. We can do this. We can live in a better and more sustainable world. We just have to commit to it. So I invite you to consider that this powerful approach has been in front of us all along, and I call it a reframe about how we think about the problem. Like Aristotle's golden mean or the Buddhist idea of the middle way, we need to seek this middle ground between despair and denial. With the global environmental crisis, the middle way is that way between. Because despair and denial don't help us. They make us feel hopeless and helpless, and they don't allow us to feel the pain in the world. But the middle ground is vast, and it encompasses the wide ranges of responses evident in the human experience, because it's all these little ideas that add up to the big one. So to define the middle ground more explicitly, let's look at nature's equilibrium and then apply this idea back to our own human society. So one of the defining aspects of nature is the way that ecological systems self-correct towards what we call balance. That's what we call it. Ecological systems tend to seek stability. So if you go all the way back to your high school or formal learning in biology, if you took a biology class, a slight change is always corrected by some second-order effect. It's also known as negative feedback, and that tends to bring the system back into equilibrium. So to illustrate, ecological textbooks often use human-animal interactions as examples, such as bears that can only eat salmon, and salmon who are only hunted by bears. Right? This is a good, simple framework. If the bear population grows particularly large one year, the total population needs more fish to feed it, and that makes the salmon population go down. Okay, so now you have more bears, fewer salmon. Over time, if there are fewer salmon, there's not enough food for all the bears to eat. Some bears will starve, fewer cubs will be able to prosper, and that leads to a smaller bear population. More time passes, the bear population gets smaller, the salmon population goes up again due to having fewer natural predators, and the bear population recovers. So there's this constant cycle of a bit of this and that, and then seeking that equilibrium. So the example is correct, and you can look at many other ecological systems and find such examples, but it doesn't take into consideration that we now understand that equilibrium is not quite that simple. Part of our public imagination is that nature seeks balance, but in truth, they tend to be more dynamic systems, chaotic, than we have long understood. And that's true for social systems. And the idea, I think, is the insight we need to tackle the global environmental crisis. So in ecological systems, where you see this balance, imbalance, back to balance, and in learning spaces, you see that too, right? And there's many frameworks in organizational development and theory and leadership about different ways to deal with the forming, the norming, the storming, and performing. It's a similar concept. The middle ground in transformation is a really energetic place. It's not a place of moderation or compromise. It's a stance we take to meet the powerful dynamics between despair and denial with an equally strong and balancing force. And to create this powerful force requires recognizing that our own social systems, like natural ones, are chaotic, dynamic, subject to change, uncertain, and will seek a constant source of stabilization. This idea is drawn directly from Mesereau's work, but also from the field overall. So in this middle ground, I'm suggesting two elements as an approach to change. So here we are. We're in the middle ground. We're doing the work we think we need to do. There's two things we need to do to get on, to be on the path of transformative learning. The first is to acknowledge our troubled hearts. It all starts with hearts. If you think about it, denying climate change, that's not a logical thing, but it's a heart thing. The same with despair. It's heart. It all comes down to that. The second is to actually take an active step in one's mind to step on the path of transformative learning. So important, of course, is we have to acknowledge disorienting dilemmas. This is what we all wonder about, what are the catalytic factors to get people to acknowledge the disorientation and to experience all those feelings of disorientation. By acknowledging it, and you may experience it, for example, when you read about the effects of climate change, you're helping to build your own resilience. We know from psychology that when you acknowledge pain and you acknowledge uncertainty and fear and anxiety, that you begin to rob it of its ability to dominate your life, our lives. I faced this when I was much younger and saw a poster that said, "Know your endangered species." Know your endangered species. And one of the species on the poster was humans. It was a protest poster from the 1980s when I was in college, and honestly, I just couldn't shake the image from my mind. It was the visual image. That one idea created a profound sense of sorrow amidst a culture at the time that was summed up with the phrase from the movie Wall Street, "Greed is good." It was in 1987, right? The go-go 80s in some places. The poster made me heartsick in some way that I just couldn't define or even acknowledge. But over the decades, I've heard many others tell similar stories about their sudden realization, sometimes based on something small that stuck with them. Now, my focus has been environment, but you may have also come across this in your research and your teaching and your learning in other spheres. In one of my research projects, a participant who had been a corporate lawyer with British Petroleum said that one day he was sitting in the corporate boardroom and someone said, land is worthless until humans build on it. Who cares about that damn turtle? There's more. My research participant, who had been a loyal, dedicated member of the company, he just got up. He walked out of the boardroom, quit his job, had a hard conversation with his family, and he set out on a new path, trying to figure out how he could make it in the world in a new way. That was his troubled heart. That was his disorientation. Second, I've said we've got to actually step on the path. We have to build our own capacities that are essential for making all those ideas turn into reality for ourselves and others. We do this by engaging in transformative learning models set out by ourselves and colleagues, which can be applied to the climate crisis. In initial orientation, we explore those collisions. We investigate our biases and assumptions through learning and exploring with others. We can use this middle ground idea where lots of ideas are being created and made real. We can seek out others that have similar experience and start to explore our options. This exploration involves reading and thinking and writing and journaling and talking and being challenged and challenging. These are all the building blocks of learning. This is what we know what to do. This is what we spend our lives doing. And it starts with that heart openness, though. You have to have both present. And that leads to building our knowledge. When I started out on this path, some of my favorite books were Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac, and Thoreau's Walden. Silent Spring is about the effects of chemicals on other species, especially birds, as well as ourselves, and is often credited with catalyzing the modern environmental movement. Thank you, Rachel. Leopold's Sand County Almanac is the story of one person's love of a particular place, a small place, and how tending that place is healing for both himself and the plants and animals on it. Walden is famous for its romanticism, direct from the German and English romantics and poets about nature. Again, though, it reminds us that we're all part of a greater ecological system. Today, I continue to read books that help explain people's reactions to the environmental crisis, like Peter Federici's Beyond Climate Breakdown, in which he argues we need to create new stories to solve the global environmental crisis and to help us overcome our denial and fear. And I'm suggesting that the middle ground of many ideas is one new way to think about solutions, to create our new narratives and our new stories. Or I read books like The Ministry of the Future by fiction author Kim Stanley Robinson, a surprisingly hopeful book that also does what Federici is advocating for, the invention of stories that reimagine a way forward. This is the power we have within us. And once we grow our confidence from what we are learning, we can begin to plan a course of action. Ultimately, these steps lead us to a reimagination or a reimagining of our role in the world. And we can try out these roles. We can explore new ideas relevant for our personal and professional growth. Some examples include you might incorporate new ideas into your teaching, ask powerful questions, decide to volunteer time or support others who do. For some, you might launch a new career or seek change where you are. Embarking upon a transformative journey, no matter what it is, it builds our confidence and is a prerequisite to new understandings about the conditions that created the initial disorientation. So I'm suggesting that transformation begins with feeling our hearts, then seeking to understand our hearts. It's only then that we can actively in our minds and physically embody that and place our first step on the path of transformation. We put that key in that locked door and we face what scares us most and we change us and thus we change the world. From this initial disorientation, we move to reorientation, and in reorientation, we find the deepest, most profound learning, as hard as it is. So part of the task of a teacher, of an educator, is to help people not be afraid of that. From reorientation of ourselves, we move to global reorientation, transforming our dilemma from an extreme situation and move the whole thing to a place in the middle where we can accept fresh ways of thinking, tell new stories, and act in response. I have lots of examples of the many ideas that are currently happening, and I would highly recommend that if you go to the internet, we always are looking at doom stories, right? There's even a phrase for it, but I can't remember it offhand, something about catastrophic scrolling or something. But if you type in the other direction, write in positive stories about the environment, literally hundreds and thousands of pages come up that demonstrate the kind of invention, the people who are already on the path, and I think can inspire us rather than us living with our despair alone. So there are many ideas that add up to the big idea. They may seem small in that their individual impact may not be great. Some days may seem very small, but you're not. And collectively, they add up to the big idea. This is how we will energize our responses to the situation at hand. This is transformational learning on a global scale. We are more powerful than we know. Never forget that. The root of our disorienting dilemma is a human, spiritual, and emotional crisis. Our disconnection from the earth has led us to a way of operating in the world that separates humans from other species. Our logic from emotion, and our science from our heart. These separations create a false disconnect between us and the natural world that does not serve us in confronting today's challenges. So in forging a new relationship within us, between each other and between humans and nature, we can turn to transformative learning to be a catalyst for such change. Only then will we be operating in the middle ground of many ideas, a place that serves as an energetic counterforce between despair and denial. And yes, you can and should recycle. You should drive electric or hybrid vehicles. If you drive, you should drive less. Use public transportation. Reduce your footprint. Lobby governments. If you live in a democracy, vote in ways you think will improve the world. Seek peace in all things. Fight against tyranny. Fight for equity, fairness, and justice. But even more than all of that, it all starts with acknowledging our troubled hearts, which leads to transforming our relationship with nature and with each other, and avoiding the crisis facing us, to take that different path of transformation that allows us to enter a different age where we see each other as kin and act accordingly. Or as the Ojibwe greeting goes, when we see each other, we really see each other. For me, I never did resolve my first disorienting dilemmas, I'm sure you can hear. But I did learn that living with ambiguity and contradiction is part of the human condition. And that was a good start for a 12-year-old. And perhaps that's a good start for all of us. Thank you.
Katrina, thank you so much for the arc that you just wove for us, for what you have invited this community into. What a way to get us started in terms of agitating good trouble and thinking about what we as a community might do moving forward. I think George and I, we're gonna organize ourselves in a moment. Yeah, we'll find our way. George and I are going to organize around a quick check-in with you in terms of our reflections and questions for you. But before we do that, I wanted to start by giving it over to the community. That was a lot to think about. I'm imagining our own disorienting dilemmas, and hearts have been moved by everything that you've said. So before we add into that and help with, as you described, making sense of our troubled hearts, I'm just going to invite people to turn to each other and start by sharing what stood out to you, what struck you as you listened to Katrina. What are the ideas that are coming up for you? And while you do that, we'll reorganize ourselves up here. So go, turn to a partner. We'll just give you a couple minutes.
Patience, and I would like you now to concentrate a little more so we can proceed. We have like 20 minutes to move on, and Aliki was so right about these chairs. Yeah, did you? Yes, but I mean, we had to live with these chairs. So this is how it's going to go. I'm going to just say a few words about how I felt during the speech by Katrina, then ask a question that came to my mind as I was listening to her beautiful speech. And then, again, you're going to have a part, and then Yabon, my friend, is just going to take over, and then hopefully all this will end in about 20 minutes. We're not sure about that. Katrina, thank you very, very much. Your speech was very inspiring. I really enjoyed also the slides that were pictures from nature, and at the end there was a dark slide which was really very, very connected to what might happen if we continue to think the way, unfortunately, we keep thinking. So it really was, for me, one of the things that I realized, and it was like a revelation to me, was the notion of eco-grief. Although it may be for you something common, for me it was just, I had to hear the word to realize that this is something that happens every day, but you don't really realize it when you hear that something goes so wrong in the environment. And I'd like to go directly to the question. I sensed in your speech that there was, let's say, an idea about individual responsibility versus collective responsibility, and individual action versus collective action, and more specifically political action. In my sense of understanding, we can do many things individually, but we are governed individuals. We are governed by the you. You said something about the you is not going to change your life. You are going to change your life, and you are right. But in some cases, the influence of the political institutions is so important and so crucial that I don't have the luxury, and I choose that word very carefully, the luxury to do the things that I would like to do. So, in your opinion, within those actions that you recommend, do you also think that since ideologies drive our heart, we should start a critique on the ideologies and the political dimension of our thinking in order to really make a more collective change? You said at some point, go out and vote for people that are really close to your ideas and close to your concerns about the environment. Isn't that something that had to do with ideology critique and the idea that transformation has to be an ideological transformation, and a transformation about how we understand the world? This is my only question for you.
I mentioned that my father was a farmer and a mechanic. He was also a fisherman. And one of the things that he always said is that everything is connected to everything. And I think about this, so I think about our individual actions potentially, the institutions that govern us, as you rightly point out, and the way that they can control and dominate and create the framework that is dissonant with what I'm talking about. We know that. In addition to all the other interests that we may not only be barely aware of, that also influence us. So I often think about this as a bold man, which is not, nothing new in this group, but to many people that is a new idea. That what we have to decide is what is it you have to decide. I can't decide this for you. What is it that you feel in your zone of control, and what's in your sphere of influence, and what do you choose to do? And if every one of us did that, we would be engaging in a large ideological transformation. Because you are exactly right. Ultimately, the underlying logic is we're living as if we're in a world of infinite resources, and it is a finite world. That logic has to shift. That's it. It's only one problem. We have to shift that logic. And that's going to take all of us to do whatever we can, wherever we are. Because what's the alternative? There's no alternative. Of course there's an alternative, because a lot of us are living it, including myself. I live with these contradictions every day. But this is the path we are on, and we need to make sure we're all on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Love so much of what you've been saying, going from painting the picture of the big and then coming back to the small. What's the alternative? There's no big ideas. We all start from where we are. In a moment, I'm going to turn it back over to the room and ask folks to have a second discussion about so what connections are you all making in this space, and surface some more now what's from all the great examples that you gave. I know I'm sitting with a bit of now what this week right here, right now for this community. But before that, I have one of those scale and context big questions for you. That's part of the meaning I'm sitting with from everything you said. Love that you started with the example from your life of growing up in a rural community with your father who's a farmer, fisherman, etc. And you also said that often the scale of the solutions being offered don't match the scope of the problem. As someone from by heritage, by background from the so-called global south, I know I hear often within my communities globally and locally that our communities are paying among the highest costs for a lack of environmental justice. For the lack of environmental justice. And as George said, it's a luxury and a privilege even to be in this room talking about it. My family is from Freetown, Sierra Leone. I was born in Europe, here in Germany. My parents traveled the world, chose to go back to West Africa because they wanted us to have that grounding in that community. I grew up watching a beautiful landscape country that could sustain itself from subsistence farming and had so much surplus they could sell it on the global market just because the ecology was so good for growing pretty much anything. To a country that started to lack economically, a country that devolved into war, and a country now that frequently experiences mudslides, right? We have now a context where there's an initiative for Freetown the Tree Town, like encouraging everybody to plant a tree, literally, because the situation is so dire. What would you offer this room to be thinking about in terms of transforming our thinking when it comes to environmental justice for the global south, but for all of us? Because unless we are thinking about solutions that matter to the most, the people that are being the most impacted, we're not going to transcend this challenge.
I love this question. This is a big, huge, challenging question. And it's something I grapple with all the time. First, I'd like to say it also happens within countries. So the structural inequality within countries drives the same kind of environmental injustices. So it's always the poor and the vulnerable that are the communities that end up being mined or where the toxic waste goes, and they're always the ones exposed to the greatest environmental risks. There's all the data supports that. And then when you take it globally, everything you've just said is right on, and it's a long legacy of colonization, imperialism, racism. The list goes on and on. And this question is so hard to answer because what I would say, my current thinking, is that we have been able to off-lead the Western world, because it's the Western world that came up about West. It's been this dominant paradigm of the Western world, I'll use it as a shorthand, have been able to outsource a lot of the environmental pollution, devastation, etc., extracting natural resources from other places and leaving them devastated in order to fuel their own economies. And now look at the global south and say, you have to pay up. And that is another kind of injustice. So what I'm saying is that those of us in societies that are industrial and post-industrial have a greater responsibility, because we have to take more of the burden, because we have been pushing the burden onto other places that have had very little control and very little ability to empower the solutions. Not that it's not about talent, it's about the ways in which these systems have been, and peoples have been dominated and oppressed. And that is still a subject, it's sort of the moral imperative behind the spiritual crisis. And I don't have an answer yet. In my own mind, I have a lot of ways to think about it. But again, the scale of the solution does not equate to the scale of the problem yet.
Thank you, and thank you for your candor with that. So I just wanted to trouble us a little bit by throwing that in, and thank you for naming all the systems, right? This is, and I framed it in the Global South, but in terms of world systems, and it's also, as I said, both globally and locally. I painted a brief picture of my family heritage. I also, as Alike mentioned, live in Vancouver, Canada. Moved to the interior of British Columbia a couple years ago, and I was a climate refugee for a night because I got a knock on the door saying you have to eat back now, wildfire down the hill is coming up the hill, your house is in the line of fire, pack your kids, leave, and we'll let you know if and when you can come back. Thankfully for us, it was only a night and our house was still standing when we came back. So these are global issues, they are local issues, we're all in it. So just wanted to trouble us with thinking about those contexts as well as we turn it over to you and ask you to have one more conversation about the so what, now what of everything you've heard. for you, whether it's a big idea, whether it's a start small where you are, whether it's what are the questions you're asking in your classrooms, whether it's how do you want to show up this week when you're engaged with ideas that might trouble you, so that we're all in this transformative learning journey together. What does that look like for you? So in the next 5 minutes or so, have a conversation about, so what connections did you make to everything you've just heard, including those 2 questions we just asked Katrina? And now what? What could you offer right here, right now, head, heart, hands, as we be together this week? Hold your now what idea, make as many notes as you want to, but we're going to run the mic when we come back and hear some of your reflections in the room, to the so what, the connections you've made to everything you've heard, and the now what, the action ideas that you're offering in this room right here and right now for the rest of the week. Sounds good? Clear as mud? You know what you're doing? All right. All right, over to you. We'll call you back when we're ready.
So, who would like to start? There you are. Just stand up and say.
I'll run the mic to you. Please stand up, and we ask that you keep it really brief. I'll hold the mic and come your way.
Our colleague who lives in Dubai, and she's from Lebanon. Well, I don't remember her name, so please.
My name is Alisa.
There you are.
I run schools in Dubai. So these are kids who have lived their lives hearing adults and probably buying into the concept of if it's only me, then it doesn't have an effect. Why? I'm just one. It doesn't have an effect. I'm just one. It won't change things. So by discussing here with Mitzi and hearing her completely disorienting thoughts today, I've decided that maybe I should run a campaign in my schools that falsifies that belief that one doesn't make a difference, and start hearing the kids saying, even if I'm one, I will make a difference.
Thank you.
Way to get us going.
Next one. Next one. Here we have one. Here. And you must turn your tag so I can see who you are. Oh, and you are Lynn. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Lynn Tanimezi. I'm a student at University, and I live in Vancouver, Canada. So one of the things that stood out to me was your question before we connected to environmental justice. And just to add to dialogue is, I think what's really lacking and what's needed is Ubuntu. We need humanists, we need to be human, we need to really connect what it means when we do, I did write this down, so I want to talk. So we need to connect like values, our cultural values, and connect it to Ubuntu as a value. So I just wanted to add that we need more humanity, and just based off the way I move. It's just funny, just the connection when you brought that question to Dr. Katrina Rogers is, it is important for the Western world to look at how our values connect to those humanity and Ubuntu values and connect that to really, really look at environmental injustices.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, thank you. Ubuntu, of course, that idea that I am, because we are, right? Like, we are interconnected and together, right?
Just next to you.
Just as an elder, my name is Lenny Wildflower Fielding again. So, as an elder, I can tell you everything I ever did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, everything that worked involved collaboration. There's no way you can do it without collaboration. And I just want to tell people that it's so important. Groups matter more than you think. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. Every person matters. Go together. There's an African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we just heard that in Ubuntu as well. So way to go in terms of thinking about the week. I'll turn it over to George to close.
Yeah, I thank you all I'd like to thank all of you for participating. We would like to have some more time for participation, especially from that part of the group. We had more from this part, but it doesn't matter. I would like also to thank Professor Ocha for your wonderful speech today. You really gave us food for not thinking, but also acting. Because if we just stop at thinking level, we don't do much. We have to act. Actually, act in our communities, act in our schools, act in our society. If we really want to bring about change, there's no other way, I'm afraid. So what's next? Then yes, let's give a big applause